was the coach of the Miami Dolphins. And he was one of those great coaches that had an undefeated season, 16-0. And he's on the speaking circuit, and he shares a story that I want to share with you. When Shula was the coach of the Miami Dolphins, he couldn't go anywhere in Miami without people going up to him and wanting to talk to him and get his autograph and take his picture and talk about Sunday's game. He was relatively kind of a quiet guy, so he didn't really like all the fanfare. So he convinced his wife that during the off-season that they would buy a little log cabin up in New Hampshire and get away from Miami and just get away for the whole summer and be away from everybody. So they move up to this little town in New Hampshire, population about 100 people. And they move in this little town. They find out that there's this old-fashioned movie theater, just one movie screen, and they said, you know what, let's go see a movie tonight. So Shula and his wife went to the movie. They walked into this theater, they bought their popcorn, they bought their tickets, they walk in this little theater, a handful of people in the theater, and as soon as they saw Mr. and Mrs. Shula walk in the theater, everyone in the theater turned around and saw him walk in and stood up and gave him a stand ovation and started clapping. And Shula's head gets really big, and he leans over to his wife and says, man, I can't even walk in the middle of New Hampshire without people know who I am. And his wife calms him down. They watch this movie, and the movie was very compelling, and it was very moving. As Shula's walking out of the theater, he starts talking to some of the locals about how incredible this movie is, and he realizes that these people have absolutely no idea who he is. So he goes up to the old guy he was sitting next to, he's walking out, and says, sir, do you know who I am? And the old guy says, I have absolutely no idea who you are. And Shula looks at him and says, well, why'd you give my wife and I a stand ovation when we walked in the theater? And the old guy looks at Shula and says, you must not be from around here. Shula shakes his head, no. He says, because there's only 8 people in the theater. They don't actually start the movie till the 10th person shows up. So we're all just very excited when you guys walked in. I love that story, and that's really the ultimate story of humility, and Shula does such a better job sharing that story. But I wanted to start off this morning with that talk because that's really the story of my life. It's the most humbling beginnings. When you look at my accomplishments, it's so humbling to read all those things, but the reality is I'm completely dyslexic, and I really struggled through school. I struggled through elementary school. I struggled through junior high school and even high school. And I watched my friends graduate high school magna cum laude and summa cum laude, and I graduated high school, thank God almighty, cum laude. I mean, I just barely graduated school. I remember going to my guidance counselor my senior year, Mr. Tilton, and looking at him and telling him I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to Notre Dame, Boston College, and I wanted to go to law school, and eventually I wanted to get into public service, maybe even run for governor of New York. And he looked at me and he said, Tommy, you're a great kid. You're an Eagle Scout, you're a class president, you're on the football team. You're a great kid, but your GPA is 1.9. You need a 2.0 to even graduate. And you know what your class rank is? You know what your SAT score is? You're not going to get into any college. And so you got to be able to read well to go to college. And so he gave me a brochure, and this brochure was a brochure that says BOCES. And BOCES is a trade school in upstate New York. And there's nothing wrong with BOCES. There's nothing wrong with being a carpenter or plumber or electrician. That wasn't my passion, but my guidance counselor said, college isn't for you. Here's where you should go, to BOCES. And about 2 months before I was going to graduate high school, a group called Up With People, this international musical group, came to my high school. I never had a passport. I'd never been on an airplane before. I thought you needed a passport to go to New Jersey. I never traveled before out of the country. And this international group came to my high school, and 120 students ages 18 to 25 on stage singing about peace and building friendships. And they were black, they were white, they were Jewish, they were Christian, they were Muslims, they were atheists. They were communists, they were capitalists, all over the world, young people singing rock and roll music about building bridges of understanding. And after the show, I was so mesmerized with this show. This really, really, really cute girl from Sweden, about the age of 20 years old, comes up to the front of stage just like this and says in the cutest little Swedish accent, if you're between the ages of 18 and 25 and want to take a year off your life and travel all over the world with Up With People, come to the front of the stage and talk to me after the show. Well, after the show was over, I wanted nothing to do with traveling the world with Up With People. I just wanted to meet the hot girl from Sweden, so I ran up to the front of the stage and started talking to this cute girl, and the first question I asked is, what kind of GPA did you get Up With People? And she didn't know what I was talking about. And finally she said, Tom, we're looking for young people that want to take a year off your life and travel all over the world and live in host families and do community service and change the world. So instead of going to BOCES, I went to Up With People, and I spent a year of my life traveling all over the world. It changed my life. It changed my heart serving others. And that 1 year actually turned into 9 years eventually, traveled over 60 countries and 3,000 host families all over the world serving others. I fell in love with servant leadership. And eventually, 25 years later, I became the CEO and president of that organization. But I never gave up that dream that I wanted to go to law school. So I finally did get accepted to college. I went to East Carolina University. It took me 5 years to graduate. I graduated with a 2.0 GPA. I took Math 1065, basic algebra, 5 times. On the 5th time failing that class, my teacher said, "Have you ever been tested for dyslexia?" And here I was, 24 years old, and never even been tested for it. And that's when I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and I finally graduated East Carolina, barely graduated, and I still had that dream that I wanted to go to law school. It's my one dream. And so it was time to apply to law schools. You know, I struggled in high school, I struggled in college, I took the LSAT, I got in the bottom 98 percentile. I knew I wasn't going to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or MIT or any great law school, so I researched there's 434 law schools in North America. And I researched what are the bottom 37 law schools, like the easiest no-brainer law schools to get in. I just had to get accepted to one of them. I applied to all 37 schools. I had $4,000 to my name. After working for other people all those years, I saved up $4,000, took my life savings out, and spent it all on these law school applications, mailing them from Japan, and this is what happened. I never shared this story until I wrote a book. And I shared this story, and thousands of people from all over the world have been writing back saying, "We love this story." But I was always ashamed to share this because I was always ashamed to tell people that I struggle reading and I have dyslexia. Because this is actually the original file that I've had in my closet since 1995 of the original 37 rejection letters of the worst law schools in North America. Every one of them. And I laugh now. I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I travel over the world speaking to 200 companies a year, speaking about leadership. But back then in 1995, 37 of the easiest law schools, every one of them rejected me. It was tough. Your whole life thinking you want to be something. And so I thought back in my life, and I never quit dreaming. I never quit giving up. High school was tough. College was tough. Now law school. Everything I wanted, it took hard work to get through this dyslexia. But I had people in my life that breathed hope, that breathed goodness, and that breathed confidence and belief in me. My mom and my dad. My dad's right here, sitting over there. And I had a teacher in high school named Mrs. Singer. I had a teacher in college named Jack Carnes. I had people in my life that just said the most magical words, the 4 most magical words that any coach can give any player. I believe in you. And I never thought I'd hear those words from a high school football coach. And I want to share a great story of a man that changed my life, that was a game changer in my life. I was a really mediocre athlete. I played a little baseball, I skied, I played on the soccer team in JV, and I played my freshman year of high school in soccer, my sophomore and my junior year, and I never played. I was always on the bench. Even if it was like 16-0, the coach would put me in like the last 30 seconds just so I can trip over my feet. I mean, I was basically the water boy. So I went to my coach after my junior year and said, "Coach, I'm going to be a senior next year. Is there any chance of getting any playing time on a varsity soccer team?" And he wasn't mean. He just looked at me and he said, "No." And so I didn't do that. I didn't laugh. I was devastated. I mean, it was this one more rejection. And I remember going up to the football field. There was a track around where the football players. I'm walking around the track, just round and round, just thinking about what I want to do with my life and what sports I want to play. And I didn't know at the time, but the football coach noticed me walking around with my head between my legs. I spent most of my time in the resource room in high school because that's where people with dyslexia hang out, in the resource room. And one day the head football coach comes there and says, "I want to talk to you." I go into Coach Bob Veltiti's office. I've never really been in the football coach's office before. I never really had one-on-one time with the head football coach. And he looks at me and he says, "Do you like playing soccer?" I said, "No, I'm terrible." He says, "Have you ever kicked a football before?" I said, "No, I'd never played football before." He says, "How would you like to be the kicker on the Suffern High School varsity football team?" I said, "Oh my God, that'd be incredible. I've never been on a varsity team. I've never had a football jersey. I've never played football before." He said, "But we're gonna make some rules. First, you gotta tell the soccer coach that you're gonna quit with integrity and you're gonna come play football for me. And the second thing you're going to do is you're going to practice all summer. And he gave me a bag of footballs, told me how to sit up, take the 2 steps back, the 2 steps over, and he told me how to kick a field goal. And he said, Tommy, if you take these bags of footballs and you practice all summer, you come back to spring training or summer training in August, you try it for the team. If you can kick 30, 40-yard field goals, you'll make the team. I couldn't believe it. And then he looked at me and he said, those 4 words, I believe in you. You can do this. I remember grabbing those 4 footballs and going back home, and I had summer school every year, so I went to summer school in the summer in the mornings, and then after summer school, every day I went to the football stadium. I walked there with that bag of footballs in the tow, and I would kick 200 footballs every day. I don't care if it rained or what kind of weather. Every day I was out there kicking extra points and field goals. That's how obsessed I was that I wanted to win. I wanted to be on this team. I never worked so hard for anything in my life. I kicked those footballs every day for the whole summer, and I showed up at summer camp, and I went there, and I was nervous, and all my friends saw me there, and they were teasing me that, I was 155 pounds, 5 foot nothing, and I'm showing up, working out, trying out for the team, and they were teasing me, and coach made me do all the drills, and then I got out there, and I started kicking field goals, 25, 30, 35, 40 yards out. Coach came up to me and he said, how would you like to be my starting kicker? And a week later, he gave me this jersey, first jersey I ever got. How would you like to be number 1, Suffern Mounties? And put your name on the back of it. You're going to be my starting place kicker. And we got a great season ahead of us. Turns out that Coach coached over 25 years, and this season was the best team he's ever coached. We went undefeated that year up until the championships, and then we got beat by our arch rival, Clarkstown North. But I remember that season and kicking extra points and just being part of that team and how proud I was and how much that did for my confidence and how much I loved being a part of that team. But the reality is that we had a quarterback named Danny Munoz that was an unbelievable quarterback, and I didn't kick a field goal the whole season because the guy was so good. He put it in the end zone every time, so I just kicked extra points. And sometimes I missed them. And one time, it was a big game, and the game was against Clarkstown North. And we were undefeated, won 6 games up to the point, and we had one more game, and then if we won that game, we'd go to the county championship. It was a away game. We were playing Clarkstown North, and it was a tough game. And they were actually winning, back and forth, and it turns out that there was 2 minutes left of the game. They're up 21-19. We get the ball, 2 minutes left. Danny Munoz drives the offense down the field through passing and rushing. He gets all the way to the 20-yard line, but unfortunately it's 4th down with 22 seconds left in the game. And Coach Feltiti had to make a decision whether to get Danny Munoz in for the Hail Mary to win the game or to bring in a kicker, Tommy Spaulding, to kick the field goal and hopefully win it with 22 ticks on the clock. And I didn't know this at the time, but when I read the book and he read my book and he heard the story, he wrote his version of the story. And what he did is he went to the special teams coach and said, could Spaulding make this kick? And the special team says, Coach, he said, yes, he can. He kicked this right from the sack spot, 37 yards right before the game in practice. Then he went to the assistant coach, Bill White, and says, should I put Spaulding in for the kick? And the guy says, are you crazy? He's never even hit a field goal all season, and he's got 22 seconds. He's not going to be able to do it under the pressure. And Coach Feltiti makes a decision. And he says, Spaulding comes up and says, you're out there, kick your team out there. And I go, no, you got to throw Danny Munoz in. I can't kick this 37 yards. There's a lot of pressure. Packed stadium. I walk out there, and I'm so nervous, and thank God the other coach called a timeout to ice the kicker. So I'm out there on the 20-yard line, just nervous as can be. Never really been out there kicking a field goal before. And Coach Feltiti walks out, and he comes right up to me. And I'll never forget this. He puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says to me, I asked you to be on this team, Tommy, because you were a leader. And I need you to be a leader right now. And then he grabbed my hand and shook my hand. And he said, I'm shaking your hand to congratulate you, not for winning the game, but for the man that you became. And then he grabbed my face mask and he pulled me in close, and then he said the 4 magical words that every player wants to hear from their coach. I believe in you. I believe in you.